G'day, legends. It's Jai, that Aussie metal guy here. Before we get stuck into another great interview brought to you by Crannk.com and thatmetalstation.com, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, and that way you can keep up to date with all the best music and interviews from all over the world. Hey, how you all going? It's Jai, that Aussie metal guy here with Crannk.com and with thatmetalstation.com. So tonight, wherever you are in the world, it's a great pleasure that I'm having a chat with James Delbridge from Ottawa power, thrash, speed metalers Lycanthro, who are due to release their Port Royal single of the Running Wild cover, which came out originally on the Wild Privateers cassette. Tried to track that down myself. All sold out. If you didn't get it, you missed out. James, cheers for joining me, man.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. It's great to talk to you. Great to be here. I love the Australians and your metal scene. So thanks for having me.
No, absolute pleasure, man. First off, can you tell me a little bit about the backstory of Lycanthro?
Okay, well, that is this is a story I always really like telling, because what it is so Lycanthro started when I was in high school, and I had a pure thrash band back when then. It was like we were all a bunch of kids, and we were called Death Wish. And what happened is I was in college around this time, and around this time when Lycanthro started was my high school band broke up because high school bands and you're kids, you all end up hating each other, which is funny because I've seen every member since and we're all like cool now. So, but then when I got this new band together, we still were called Death Wish for the first maybe 3 months. And then I found when I was in college, whenever I would be waiting for the bus, there was a record store near where the bus stop where I used to go. And so if I had to wait, Ottawa buses are terrible. So sometimes you'll be waiting upwards of 30, 45 minutes for your bus. So if I had to wait that long, I'd go into the record store. And one day I was looking through the metal section and I found an album. It was called At the Edge of Damnation. And it was by a British band also called Death Wish. And so I bought it and I sent a photo to the guys and I said, hey, I found this in an Ottawa record store. We need to change our name. So then I wanted to have a name that had to do with wolves and werewolves, because that's sort of I have a huge affinity for wolves and I love old werewolf films, stuff like that. And two, I wanted to have a name that no other band in the world has. And which nowadays that's pretty tough, right? So I did a lot of extensive research and I finally came up with the name Lycanthro, because there's lots of bands called lycanthrope or lycanthropy, but I took the PE off the end and just made it Lycanthro. So that's how we got started.
Yeah, it fits really, really well. Can you tell me a little bit about the first EP for Horsemen of the Apocalypse? That was the kind of debut release for you guys, wasn't it?
Yeah, as I said, that was very early on, and that was very I don't want to say it was a little bit experimental, because we still didn't really know what our identity was at the time. I didn't really know I do now, oh, I want a straight heavy power metal band,
Yep.
We were just oh, we're melodic, but we're also thrashy too, and that EP it did pretty well for us at the time, considering the fact that we didn't have any PR and we all just promoted it ourselves.
Yep.
And yeah, we got, it was a very loose, a concept album EP-ish, where it was each song was based on the four horsemen of the
There we go. That's the cover for the people that are watching the video.
Yep, that's it right there. And the art was done by Alexander von Weeding.
Yep.
Or Whiting. If I butcher that name, I'm sorry. He's very, very talented artist. He's I love his work. It's very comic booky. And I found out because he did a lot of art for a lot of the Nuwabum bands. The reason I got him was because he did the art for the album Who Mourns for the Morning Star, I think, by Cloven Hoof.
Okay. And
I loved the art on that album, so I'm I want something similar. So there was that, and then we had Yeah, that EP did, considering the fact that, as I said, that we didn't have much PR or promotion. Again, we were all kids and we didn't really even know what that was. So it did pretty well. We got signed to our label because of that, you know, and even though it's not a particularly big label, they've been very good to us. So, you know, so it was definitely an experience that was definitely helpful in the long term, even if I can't listen to it anymore because I'm like, oh, we could do so much better now.
Yeah, a lot of bands are like that. It's definitely an eye-opening experience just to get in there and record your first album, and you already had your eye on the art. Was part of that because of the little journeys you used to make into the music store as well, and checking out bands for album art as well, that you were like, man, if I'm going to do album art, I want it to be eye-catching, something that kind of grabs you.
Oh yeah, I literally have like a list of artists I want to work with that want us to do art for us at some point. Like, yeah, like there's always like, whenever, if I go into the record store, if I see something online, if it's an art that I like, I will always look up who it is.
Yep.
And then I'll add them to my list, because there's some artists that who are very great. Like, hell, one of the first ones was the guy who did the art for Mark of the Wolf was a guy named Vilio Josto, who he did a bunch of art for a lot of bands I like, a lot of the sort of European newer bands like Mystic and who else did he do art for? I'm trying to remember. Our friend's band Warsenal, he did art for, and
yeah, that's a cool cover, that Mark of the Wolf
one.
Eh?
Oh yeah, and I don't think I've actually ever told this part of the story yet, but that artwork that we have there was actually a second draft. And what I mean by that is that we actually got a decently big artist to do the art for the first album.
Yep.
And I won't mention any names because we never ended up using it. Yeah. But I remember feeling kind of cheated after we got the final thing we'd already paid, because it looked awful, honestly. So, and I'm just like, wow, we paid all this money to this like famous like metal artist, and this is what he gave us. We're not using this.
Yeah.
So yeah, Vilio, you know, very affordable, and he got the job done in maybe about half the time and did a million times better job.
Yeah, well, that album come out in 2021 as well, kind of almost 3 years after that first EP as well. And your sound had definitely matured and grown. I dare say you would have played a butt ton of shows around Canada as well in between that time to kind of hone your sound. And
yeah, exactly. And it's funny you say that, because like most of the songs are on Mark of the Wolf. They were all songs that we were playing live anyways. Yeah. So it was, you know, it was natural to do that. But
did that give you a chance to kind of get them perfected? And, you know, this is kind of how we want it for the album as well, if you're playing it before you actually done that?
Kind of, because the thing that because the thing is that a lot of times it's a lot of like fans don't realize how different the process is for live and for an album, because this has happened to us, and it's happened to literally every band. Is you'll play something live and you'll think it sounds great, you go into the studio, play the exact same thing, and it sounds awful. So you have to like fine tune and see what works and see what doesn't. And with recording technology being as sophisticated as it is now, there's no room for error. You know, it's like everything, unfortunately, like, you know, there's something to be said about how it's so sophisticated now that like everything has to be perfect. Like, you know, you'll have all these people from like who are from the 80s who are like, oh, you know, modern album production, I hate it, blah, blah, blah. But I personally love it. But again, I'm just because I'm a nerd like that. But yeah, it's just because it's gotten so much different that you have to approach things differently, you know, like even the big bands, you know, have to adhere to a lot of these modern recording techniques that, you know, are a bit unorthodox compared to like how it was back in the day. So yeah, so that's what I mean. It's like, even if you play live a bunch, that doesn't mean you're going to be good in the studio. Yep. You have to sort of it's one of those things that's kind of unfortunate, because I always encourage bands to invest in their own recording equipment, because if you recording yourself or recording anything, it takes practice, and not even just on the recording side, but the playing side, like being able to play to a click clearly and stuff like that. That is something that is a skill, I find. And I feel bad for some bands that, that they don't know how to do that, and they only go to the studio like once a year or once every 2 years, and it's one of those things where like that's the reason why the big bands sound so good, is because they have the funds to go to the studio literally whenever they want, so that's why I always say, hey, home recording is the way of the future. If you invest like $500 in a DAW and an interface and a good microphone, that's all you need.
Yeah, and the being able to record at home and work as well. Not everybody can ideally catch up like a couple of times a week as well. So you're able to still do that recording, send parts to each other as well, and go, hey, what do you think of this? And it's a lot easier to be able to make and produce and get these albums out as well, especially for bands like yous coming up through the underground scene to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like it's one of those things that it's an investment, but it will help you out in the long term. Like, it's not just us. I know lots of bands that the only thing, because I always say the only thing you should go to a studio for is drums, because drums you need to have like an actually like sound, like an actual a room that's fitted for recording and stuff like that. Like and you need like a bunch of mics, you need a console, because like miking a drum set, you're gonna have like 10, 15 mics on there, so an interface only has 2 ports. So for drums, that's the main thing that people should go to the studio for, is drums. Literally everything else can be done at home. You don't need to waste money, like the thing I always do is that you don't need to waste money, because this has happened to me before, where you don't need to waste money to go to the studio if you're the vocalist like me, and then you go in and then you can't sing because it's like a day where you're like, you have like a tickle in your throat or something like that, and then all the takes sound like shit, that's that. But when you're at home, you can do it whenever you want. So that's sort of, and you're not limited by a time restraint. So that's why like you can take the time to actually cultivate the sound. So that's well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Exactly. And I want to ask a couple of tracks. Can you tell me, like, pick a couple of tracks off of that Mark of the Wolf album that you really, really do enjoy playing, or your favorites, or anything like that, man?
Oh, like okay. So my favorite tracks off Mark of the Wolf. This might be cliche, but the 2 singles we put out, Crucible.
Yep.
Crucible, because that was the very first song I wrote for Lycanthro, because 3 of the songs on the album were actually songs we used to play when as Death Wish. So those were like from way before, but Crucible was the very first song I wrote for Lycanthro, and that one has a special place in my heart because that one's always a crowd pleaser. It's a long song, it's 7 minutes, but it's one of those songs that like, no, it doesn't feel like it is, at least to me. And whenever, that's the one song we always play at every show, and everybody loves it. It's always usually either the opener or the closer, and people always say it's one of their favorites. And the music video we did for it, we're really proud of. So definitely Crucible. The other one I'd say is Evangelion, just because of the journey I had with that song, because that song was the most hard song to record, especially for the vocals, because that was at that point, that's the hardest thing I'd ever written. And the vocals at the end, the last chorus, were still to this day like, so it's so tough, and it's very much like a personal thing of like, oh, I'm really proud of myself that I was able to achieve that vocal performance that I did for that song. So yeah, those 2 I'd say are my 2 favorites. If I had to pick another, I'd say In Metal We Trust, just because of like how just silly it is, and everybody, and that's another one that like people seem to like a lot. Like I remember when we played at the Hyperspace Metal Festival in Vancouver, our very first metal festival, we had people coming up to us saying, "Are you going to play In Metal We Trust?" So I'd probably say those 3. If I had to pick another one, I'd probably say the title track,
Yeah.
just because I really liked a lot of the stuff I did there. But yeah.
Yeah. So how is the live scene going over there? I've seen some shots, and I'm always keen to find out what's happening all over the world with the live scenes. How are things going over there at the moment?
Here's the thing. It's weird because in Canada, I find that it actually really depends on where you are. Like I find that more Eastern Canada, where I am, is not that great at the moment, unfortunately. Western Canada, on the other hand, is incredible. Like Western Canada has way more of a metal scene than Eastern Canada does. Like Western Canada, because that's where Unleash the Archers is from, and all the big Canadian bands now, 3 Inches of Blood, they're all from out west. And when we had the opportunity to play out there for that Hyperspace Metal Festival, we noticed that the crowd there was a lot more receptive than they are here. And that's not to say that the metal scene here is bad. It's just, at least
Probably
in my
more tight-knit community, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. Like here in Ottawa, where I live, it's a lot smaller, but everybody, we're all friends, all the bands, even though we don't all play the same genres. Like, it's not cliquey at all. Like, yeah, you know what? No, it's a tiny bit cliquey, but like not in a bad way. Like we're not, because there's all the core bands, like the deathcore and metalcore bands, and then everybody else. they're all really tight, and we're all really tight, but we're friendly with each other though. It's just like one group happens to hang out with each other more than but we're all friendly with each other. So
and probably
the scene here is really good. It's just unfortunately, because of the pandemic and the fallout and stuff like that, shows aren't they're not as good turnout wise as they used to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you got to get along and support your local scene no matter where you were. I was just having this discussion, and I was trying to stay out of it, but the whole Blink 182, everyone's all like, Blink fucking, well, for one, go see a good band, and how about spend that money on your local scene, like seeing bands like Lycanthro, and like I've seen so many great bands out of my local scene that just absolutely tear it up.
And
even the underground scene in general is just absolutely bloody amazing. The amount of quality talent we have. I've seen Blink 182. I'm not throwing no shade at the cunts, but they weren't that good. Chuck on an album from 21 years ago. I've grown up a little bit since then. I'm not a teenage boy anymore. And
and your guys' scene in Australia looks fantastic. Like I have a bunch of friends bands that I've gotten to know through the internet from Australia, and I'm literally like, man, you guys have so many good bands there. What the hell? Like I'm good friends with Andy from Lord. Andy Dowling. Ah, yes, there we go.
Dude, I love that band, Lord. How can you not love Lord, man?
Yeah, exactly. From my perspective as like the outsider looking in, they kind of seem like is like the big boys over there, I guess. So but yeah, no, there's like them and Carmaria we're really good friends with. Yeah, their guitar player Jez is a really good friend of mine. We talk all the time. And their singer Jordan's incredible. And then there's like, just to name like a few other ones, like, there's obviously like the other big ones that you guys have there, like Voyager and stuff like that. And then there's even some smaller ones. Like I found this one band from there called Dissidia, who their singer is
unreal. Corey Davis, I love their Adelaide band as well. They're from my area. The singer is absolutely unreal. And Corey Davis on guitar, he's actually in Freedom of Fear. They just dropped their Carpathia album. It is a black metal bloody epic. It's unbloody real, and he's unreal, that Corey Davis. He can play like you wouldn't believe. And the vocalist to the city, it's funny you mentioned that, because that album, I actually had a chat with him for that album, was really, really cool too.
Yeah, no, it was funny because like I just stumbled on them and I see their singer just doing all this wild shit, and I'm just like, huh? So yeah, no, you guys have a fucking amazing scene over there. So I really do hope that we could go to Australia at some point. So
yeah, I've got to mention the Port Royal single. Tell me all about that, man. Making that one, bloody yeah.
Oh yeah. So oh there we go. Yeah, that's it.
There's the artwork for it as well.
Yeah. So pretty much that came about because My good friend Papi Zoltan, or Zoltan Papi. I don't remember which one's his first name or his last name. I'm pretty sure it's Zoltan Papi. He runs a little label out of Hungary called Burning Sun Records, and for the past few years they hadn't. Yep, that's it. There, Wild
That's what it
Privateer.
appeared on.
Yep. He did a couple of tribute albums for different power metal bands. He did one for Halloween. He did one for Gamma Ray, and then he did this one. And he asked us to be a part of it, which was really cool. And you know, I'm a big Running Wild fan, and I thought that and my favorite Running Wild song was Port Royal, which was funny because Zoltan was very much like wanting it to be like a deep cuts tribute. Like he didn't want any of like the famous songs on there, but it ended up being half the bands wanted to do famous songs and the other half wanted to do deep cuts. So it kind of just became sort of like a half and half. But I wanted to do Port Royal because that was the first song. Well, no, the first Running Wild song I ever heard was Conquistadors, but the first album I had from them was Port Royal. And yeah, we did that one, and it was during the pandemic. We recorded it all from home, which was really cool. And that's why, like with the mix, I thought, yeah, you can record stuff from home and still have it sound professional. So yeah, recorded all from home, and our good buddy Jack Costo from the band Seven Spires, he mixed it, and and the reason why we decided to go, yep, that's it. Actually, I have my copy. If you can just put it on camera, I have my copy right here. So yep. But yeah, it was a really fun project, and the reason why I decided to release it as a single is because we haven't been able to put out anything this year just because of logistics. We're working on a new record right now, but I wanted to put it out this year, but it was, because of different logistical issues, we haven't been able to. So I thought, well, I don't want to go a whole year without putting something out. I don't want it to be like for Horsemen and Mark of the Wolf, where it was like a 3-year gap. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to have at least something out each year. So I preferably multiple things out each year. But so I thought, why not? And so I remember I got the idea for the cover, because the cover is obviously it's a kind of a tribute to the Running Wild Port Royal album cover. And I found a guy on a Running Wild fan group on Facebook, and he did this really cool fan art of the lead singer of Rolf. And I asked him, hey, if I pay you, would you be down to recreate the Port Royal cover, but with werewolves instead of the 4 guys? And he said, yeah. And so he did that. And I got that idea because my friend's band Mind Maze did the same thing. They did a Queensryche cover, and it was from the first album. It was from, the name escapes me now. The first Queensryche album. It was, The Warning. Yeah.
Yep.
They did it. Yeah, they did a cover from The Warning, and they recreated The Warning cover with their imagery and stuff like that. So that's why I thought it'd be a cool idea to do it with us. And yeah, it's pretty much just a really fun thing to put out for people to hear. Because the thing is that we're really proud of how it turned out, and not everyone has been able to hear the tribute album. So we thought our wider fan base should be able to hear it.
Yeah, that's it. Best way to support it, stream it, Spotify service, jump over to Bandcamp, buy a heap of merch. But I love Bandcamp. That's one of my favorite platforms. Like, yeah, sometimes you got to go stream it and fucking you can't, whatever. But like for me, I love jumping over to Bandcamp, buying albums, buying digital albums. It seems to be the best way to actually get along and support the bands that you're getting into as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's you're right. That's sort of a thing now where it's like, us bands, we need to get our Spotify streams and stuff like that. But it's funny because, as much as everyone complains about it, and in some cases, rightfully
it is what
so.
It is.
It's one of those things where unfortunately,
now
that's the way the industry is going, and there isn't really anything we can do about that. Like, if you in terms of bands, like festival promoters, that's what they look at now. They look at what are your Spotify monthly listeners. That's the analytic they look at. So it's one of those things where, unfortunately, the thing I always say, and it's sort of a bit of a mantra with life, and you can, in the words of Cozy Powell from Rainbow, and the band Burning Witches as well. Sometimes in life you got to dance with the devil.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's it. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, you get the Spotify listens up. When people do come to your shows, they're buying merch as well. So the thing is to remain active, and like you were mentioning promo before, and the way you're releasing singles, to keep active through the year and keep even your social media platforms. PR is a big part of fucking what we're doing now. Unfortunately, if you just play your music and you got the best fucking album in the world, no one's listening to it, then you know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly.
Deal with the devil.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like back in the day when it was filtered, when the only albums that were put out were relatively good, because if it was shit, the record labels, no one would pick it up. So
yeah, exactly. James, look, this has been an absolute pleasure to find out some more about Lycanthro. Really, really love your music, man. It was good to finally get to chat with you. Hopefully get another chat with you really, really soon. The latest single, Port Royal, the Running Wild cover, does drop very, very soon. I think it's the 4th, is it, or the 18th?
Yes, the 4th.
The 4th of November there. You can also go grab the Mark of the Wolf album, 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Go support the band, support the scene. Put it in the stereo, crank it really loud. The neighbors are going to want to hear it. Do you have any last words, shout outs, thank yous you'd like to add in there, my friend?
Thank you so much for having me, man. This has been an amazing pleasure to get to know you and talk to you. And yeah, as you said, go follow us on all of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify. Go check out our merch page. It's lycanthromerch.bigcartel.com. And stay metal, my friends.
Oh yeah, brother, take it easy.
Mate, hey, like my man, fucking Jobber, that fucking metal guy, motherfucker, fucking